Hello. You are listening to Dads with Startups, a podcast about a couple of entrepreneurs who put family first.
Hello.
Hey, Kevin, how's it going?
Doing good. Happy New Year.
Oh, yeah, you too. Fresh
We're
beginnings.
recording this a few days after the New Year, fresh beginnings, and I'm excited about this year somehow. What about you?
Um, yeah, I'm excited. I've had a great year. I'm really pleased with the growth, but that also makes me a little bit anxious. Like I get a little bit of anxiety thinking, well, I can't quite put my finger on what I did to make this year so great. So how confident am I that this next year is going to be just as good?
Mm-hmm.
So,
A little bit of a conundrum with
yeah.
success, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a mix of like a variance of um just like a lack of confidence in myself as a founder,
Mm-hmm.
a little bit of imposter syndrome in a way.
Totally.
Like I had a great year. Was that really me? I don't know if that was really my doing. It just kind of happened,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, I mean, I think it's if you have to err on what is it err on one side or the other, probably better to err on the humble side versus the narcissistic, it's all me side. Um, but that said, I did listen to a great episode of Texting, which is a podcast I got kind of onto. I believe Rob Walling had the hosts on his show many years ago, so I started following them after that. And so I've been following them for years. They're fun to listen to because they're kind of both bumbling along with their products, and one guy in particular has started so many different products, both developers. And it was kind of a good show because the other host was really confronting him and been like, you never stick it out. You start a project and then you move on, you start a project and you move on. And I guess they have the luxury of that because maybe they have other income. But it was cool because he said at one point, he's like, why do you do that? He's like, I guess it's because I just don't have the confidence that I'm going to make this work. And, um, and I just realized I was listening, like we all kind of have that floating around a little bit. Most of us do. Again, unless we have a more of a narcissistic personality, we tend to all have that element. And no matter how far
Yeah.
we get sometimes, or how much we
I would
accomplish.
much rather spend time with a humble founder than a narcissistic one. And we
Yeah,
probably all know
right.
some of those narcissistic ones, that are
Mm-hmm.
that they tend to lean more into like the bro culture, all that kind of
Right.
thing.
Yep.
But
Totally.
I think it's also there is a flaw in that whenever, you know, when you're talking to investors, if you're going after that kind of money, you should have confidence. You should
Yeah.
bleed confidence. Um,
Yes.
I think sometimes in sales, you need to a point,
Right.
because people need to feel like your solution is the best. But if you, especially in sales, if you go overboard, it has a totally negative effect, right? Um,
That's true.
but my wife will talk to me sometimes about like we'll meet some new friends, let's say, and they're like, "Hey, John, what do you do for work?" And I'll be like, I have this little software company. It's really small. There's just three of us, and like I immediately just downplay it, and I don't
Yeah.
just start out downplaying it. I'll like add more to the story that makes it seem less of a big deal than it
Less
is. And my
shiny.
wife will be like, you need to like, no, it's pretty awesome. Like you need to not
Yeah.
present it that way. You just need to say like, yeah, I started this company and we're doing great,
Interesting.
instead of, yeah, it's not that big a deal. It's just three of us. We're not really that important. We were
Yeah.
still just pretending at this point. That's pretty much how I feel sometimes.
And then you have other people that are jumping on big podcasts and they have less revenue than you do, and they are like, yeah, I remember there was a guy in sort of in, I won't say his name, But there was this guy for a few years. I'm sure many of us heard him. He was a nice guy, totally had good things to say. But I always remember thinking he'd be like, his SaaSes were quite humble. I mean, we were looking at like 30, 40 revenue, 30, 40 or $1,000 of revenue in a year, not even like MRR. And he would be on podcasts giving advice on all these different podcasts, big podcasts about giving advice about how to do startups and all this stuff. And I was just like, dude, I know people like in my circle that are like doing 10 times more than you that never been on a podcast. How is it that you're the expert? And so it's interesting how, for whatever reason, he just felt like he deserved to be the one giving the advice, even though he had a pretty humble, level of success. And I'm sure at parties he would be the one kind of boasting about his success. Whereas
Yeah.
people like yourself and myself can be, and I'm the same way. I go to a party, I'm like, oh yeah, I have a little software business, or when I was doing WordPress, I'd be like, oh yeah, I have a little WordPress plugin business. And that would even be at developer conferences where they heard it was WordPress and plugins, and then they would just try to get out of the conversation, just completely walk off. And yet when I would say, sometimes I would tell someone the revenue I was making monthly and how little I was putting into it, and then suddenly that became interesting. And I realized, oh, I guess people are interested in some things like, passive income and things like that. So, but where do you decide to boast, and I think that's another thing that I think about, especially as someone who studies a lot of Stoicism, and not in the tech bro version of Stoicism, but in the actual like original Stoicism, is like, where do you actually, what do you gain by bragging at a party or with friends? When is it the right time to do that, turn that on versus not? And maybe it's about doing that at a conference or with customers versus at a little party. I don't know.
I don't know. It's hard. Like it goes against my nature, you
Yeah.
know. Um, yeah. I think I really detest people who like puff up their chest at
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
party,
Totally.
and so I have too much fear of being that person,
Yeah.
even though it's really hard to see myself that person ever. But yeah,
Well, one thing would be good is, so a way to help people plus, be a little more proud about what you're doing, because there's nothing wrong with taking a little, what do you call it, money off the table, profit off the table,
yeah,
using that term. You have gained some success that you're proud of. There's nothing wrong with people knowing about that. And one of the nicest ways, one of the nicest channels of doing that would be a conference or something, right? So you get the benefit of helping people, and people are like, oh, look at this guy. He's doing what I want to do, and you're inspiring some folks. So that's kind of maybe that's another a route to go versus going to a party and trying to impress everyone, which doesn't sound particularly your style.
yeah. So I have to apologize. I just felt an earthquake here in my
Oh,
office.
really?
Yeah.
Oh
I'm
dear.
not even
Okay.
kidding. I'm sitting here and I felt like this waving motion. I'm on the third floor of this
Whoa.
really old building too. And I feel this waving motion. So I just now did a quick search, and lo
Yeah.
and behold, we're
Huh.
experiencing earthquakes today up here. They're really small, like 2.8.
Oh my gosh.
Uh, yeah, 2.8
You were looking
magnitude.
the direction of your eyes. I was like, what is he looking at? He's looking at something.
I'm looking at my other monitor because I
That's
was
funny.
like, what did I just feel? Like,
Yeah.
what is this? This is real. Anyway,
Y'all don't get too many
that's
though, right? Like, it's not like you are famous for big. Are you famous for big
no,
earthquakes? Not really, right? They're kind of
no.
more
We
tremors.
we do live on a pretty big front
Oh, is that right?
of mountains, and so
Okay.
there is a
Sure.
fault line here. They've been telling us since I was little that we're overdue for large earthquakes here, but
Mm,
we yeah, that they're not very common up here. But yeah, this is wild.
those are kind of
Um,
fun.
so Kevin, what have you been working on lately?
Mm-hmm.
It's a new year. I think we talked before we started recording that we were going to go over some goals
Yeah.
time. So we can kind of shelve that in terms of what are we going to do
Big
this year
ones. Yeah.
than we did last year. But yeah, what's been new?
Yeah. So I think with the product, it has the past couple of months have been slow. It's I'd say steady. It's kind of plateaued, I'd say. We're getting a stream of people sign up. It's typically the same thing. When is your quiz feature coming out? The good news is I we are finally finished with the majority of the quiz feature. I'm testing it right now on a kind of a pre-deploy system, checking and everything out, making sure the feature is working. We're going
Nice.
to put a little box that, I think I mentioned this before, little modal kind of box that says, "Hey, use at your own risk," and people will start using it, and I'll be really excited about that. And a funny little story with that is I was trying to send my developer the wording for what to put on that box because it was like, you don't want to tell people like, all of your data is going to be trashed. You don't want to scare them too much. Like, we have some credibility here to protect, but you also don't want to be like,
Yeah.
give us all your data and there's nothing. So you got to find this nice balance. How do you say it without being too scary? And I just couldn't write it. I was getting a block, and then went on Google. I started searching examples for, beta warnings, and I just got a bunch of junk from random forums and Reddit posts, and I was so
Mm.
frustrated. And then I thought, oh, let me try this Chat GPT. And I go into Chat GPT and I get, and I'll read it out loud. Both what I wrote to it. So now for those of you who are listening and don't know what Chat GPT is, I'm sure you'll hear about it soon. It's all over the news. It's this new AI chat tool that's out. That's kind of open to the public now. So, and it will do this crazy, beautiful writing that is surprisingly comprehensive. So my prompt to it said, and I quote, "Write a warning message to users that this feature is in beta and that by using the feature, they understand that they are doing so at their own risk." That's all I said. And it came back to me with, "Warning, this feature is currently in beta and is not considered stable. By using this feature, you understand that it may not work as intended, and you are using it at your own risk. Please be aware that you may experience bugs, errors, and other issues while using this feature. We recommend that you use caution and save any important data before using this feature. Thank you for your understanding." And I was just like blown away because it filled in all these little gaps that I wanted, but I didn't know how to ask for or how to write. Like the
I
whole thing about saving your data. I didn't even think the word saving your data. I just thought this made, my mind was this may ruin your data instead of this, you should save your data. Well, that's a softer way of saying it. And then it's not considered stable. The word stable didn't come to me, but it came to it. It was
yeah.
really incredible, just the way it just completed it very beautifully and did it in this nice, lovely way. And I was excited and terrified at the same time. I was like, oh my Lord, this thing is way too powerful. It just generated this thing, and I really had nothing they always say, oh, you can edit it. It was like, there's nothing to edit here. I just basically sent it off to my developer, and now I said, put it in the app. So anyway, that was kind of a weird but good experience. I'm also going to do next time I meet with my developers, I'm going to kind of demonstrate this to them and just say, because my developers are obviously, well, I mentioned that they're not US based. So English is not their first language. So when they write like an error message, it's just embarrassing.
Yeah.
If you ever see it and you're a customer, you're going to be like, oh, where is this app from? So I'm going to ask them to start using Chat GPT for all their error messages, because this is one way I can make sure that
That's a cool
it'll look
idea.
good and it'll sound good without me having to worry about it. And then even I have a friend who's a big Shopify developer, and he's been using it to correct Liquid code, which is sort of what they use, is something called Liquid for Shopify.
Yeah.
And then also what's cool is like you can basically punch in a bunch of code. Like if you're working on a project with other people and you don't really understand what this piece of code does or this function does, you can, and I haven't tried this myself, but you can basically paste it in and it will spit out an English, plain English kind of explanation of what this is doing. If you're confused with most languages like PHP and Python and stuff.
I didn't know it would do that.
Yeah, it's crazy. Or it'll improve your code. Like you can stick it in and say, what's wrong here? It'll actually like debug it for you.
That's
So
crazy. I
it's
tried it
crazy.
out. I tried it out a couple weeks ago, and I I live in React,
Yeah.
and so I know enough to ask the right questions, I guess. I don't know, but I said the prompt was really simple. I said, create a React drop-down component using what is the library? There's a library that creates these drop-down components. Um, Downshift.
Mm.
So I said create a drop-down component that uses downshift, styled with Tailwind CSS. And then I added some more specifics, like a drop-down of, I think I said a drop-down of North American time zones, with the offset, with the time zone name in bold, the offset in gray,
That's
each
awesome.
item divided by a gray line. Like it was like natural language, that was my prompt.
Yeah.
And it spit out this component for React. Exactly. I took that and threw it into Code
Wow.
Sandbox,
Okay.
and just
That
all I
works.
had to do was add like the Tailwind CSS library, and it worked exactly like I asked. Oh, also I said at the very end, I said I also want it searchable. And so it made the
Jeez.
searchable drop down where you could click on the drop down, type in part of the time zone, find your time zone for you. It had it styled the way I want it to, just
Oh,
100%. It did exactly how, and I looked at the code and it was like, it was as good as I would have written the code as well,
yeah.
Um, and I just thought, man, they already had that. There's GitHub Copilot,
Oh,
and
is that right?
maybe GitHub Copilot does just as good of a
Oh,
job. I don't
really?
know. I've
Okay.
never actually tried Copilot myself,
Yeah.
but I think I'm going to.
Is that a paid
I
feature?
think it is paid, but
Okay.
if
Cool.
it's doing that well, it's totally worth it, I
Yeah,
think.
totally. So that's
Problem
Microsoft's
is,
feature.
personally, I haven't done that much development work this year, so I haven't
Yeah.
found a need to find more tools.
Yeah.
But I was just thinking, like, is Chat GPT or any of this AI stuff, what kind of jobs does it replace? You
Exactly.
know?
And that's the first thing that I thought is just like what are the implications of this for developers? And also like even products. I mean, what if, this is what it's doing right now. What if you as a end user say, build me a SaaS in 10 minutes that can do this, and then it pumps out an entire SaaS in a few minutes. I mean, there's the speed
Yeah,
at which it could start to accelerate things is what's kind of scaring me, because it's one thing when the internet came out, I was like, wow, we're communication so fast. And that was a big jump for humanity.
right.
But this is, this is at a different level. I'm actually a little
Yeah.
more nervous about this than the internet ever was for me. Although
Skynet.
I'm older now. Yeah, maybe as a
Yeah.
I was a teenager when the internet came out, so I had nothing to worry about. But I don't know if so. I don't know if it's the age or if it's the actual, the Skynet stuff where it's like this is a little too fast. And I guess the best thing as an entrepreneur right now in our positions is to jump on the bullet train in as much as we can to help take advantage of this early on, because not everyone's going to be, using it to boost their business. I'm sure more and more people are, but like there's going to be people that are early to this and people that are late. Better to be early, I guess. But at the same time, there's an ethical issue of like, am I pushing forward something that's dangerous in some ways, or causes problems to society? I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. For code, I mean, really, I think it just raises the bar for
Mm-hmm.
everything. And we as humans are superior machines to AI, and will be for
Mm-hmm.
at least for a very, very long
Yeah.
time. Um, but the more they raise that bar, the more we have to step up. So I think
Yeah.
professionally, a junior level developer better be able to write, like, do more than an AI, and I think it just
Oh,
raises that
interesting.
bar.
That's a good point.
And I wonder if you know, maybe it replaces some junior level developers, like the really junior ones
Yeah.
where it's like, we just give them basic work to like do these
Yeah.
basic things and replaces that job. And so allows you to just have AI generate that code that a junior level developer
Mm,
and then a senior developer has enough knowledge about the architecture, how to hook all these
right.
things up that the AI has generated, like the AI did a great job with my drop down component. Could that really integrate into the big picture on what I'm trying to do?
Yeah.
Probably not yet, but
Not yet.
um, I uh, I have friends. I had a friend I was talking to about because I tried this. I was I was in church. It was like the day
Mm.
after I signed up for this Chat GPT account,
Mm.
and we're like listening to like a sermon, right? And I told my wife, I'm like, "Look, I'm gonna have Chat." I tried to tell her about it, and she'll just like her eyes gloss over, and
Yeah.
she's like, "Whatever." I was like, "Look, I'm gonna have Chat GPT write a sermon for me," and I like put in some like prompt, and I was like, and it just like spit out this big old talk, and I
Wow.
was like, next time I'm asked to do this, if I have to get up in front of people, I'm just gonna do this and then say, "All
Yeah.
right, I had a robot write this talk."
Right.
Um, but it's so good at writing that kind of stuff, and
Yeah.
there's so much content online being generated by AI, and
Hmm.
it sometimes it has kind of a feel, to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but a lot of people, like my friend was talking to me about, well, what does this do for like our kids in school and they have to write a
Yeah.
paper in English.
Yeah.
And an English teacher does not have the time
Mm-mm.
to read each paper thoroughly enough to decide was this
Right.
AI generated or not.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
if you really look at it, you can kind of say, I think this might feel like AI. It almost feels like maybe not a native English speaker wrote it, but
Hmm.
um, I mean, it's good, not in that there's misspellings or grammatical errors, but it's just like sometimes humans don't really present ideas this way, in
True.
general, um, at least not in their first language. And so,
True. Yeah.
um, but you know, what does this mean for like schooling? And I think all it
Yeah.
does, it raises the bar again, and they're going to have to just adapt to this world where students, I mean, if
Hmm.
I was in high school and I had to write English papers, I would be using this tool for everything
Sure. Well,
and
and it's
cheating my
tempting.
way through school.
Yeah, I was like, I mean, I was very tempted to use it for a newsletter the other day, and I was like, I'm going to try to do the old-fashioned way. And I don't know if that attitude is me being old and stuck
Yeah.
like stuck in the mud,
Yeah. Grumpy old
because
man.
there's my wife
Yeah.
grew up in Korea, and they were taught how to do a lot of calculations in their head, even with calculators on the scene. And in the U.S., our kind of school system just kind of gave in, and we're like, start using calculators, instead of doing a lot of the arithmetic by hand and all this
Uh-huh.
stuff. So she can do this amazing calculations. Like if I ask her, complicated multiplication, she's like, boom, 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 division. And I think that's cool because it's sort of the same idea. Like, is there a value to knowing that even when a calculator exists? Well, there is. And then she's much better at math than me probably
Yeah.
because of that. She has a better foundational understanding. So when she took the GMAT and I took the GMAT, I was barely past the math part and she was like almost like the top, 10th% or 5%. So there is probably some value. And then also I think about the echo chamber, like if we all stop writing because we don't need to anymore, well, then it's just going to be a bunch of regurgitated garbage
Oh yeah.
slewing
Yep.
around that AI is not really creating anything new. There's no Hemingway on the scene to create a new style,
Yeah.
I assume. It's just going to be blah, 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 what we've all heard before. So who
Maybe it
knows?
just
And then
makes it easier
also,
to shine.
yeah, that could be, right?
Yeah.
And then you think about blogs and newsletters and emails. Like there's a guy who was posting how he's using this for all of his replies and his emails to customers and stuff. And it's great, but then how long will it be before you, as a customer, know that any reply you're getting from a business is probably not real? You're gonna be like,
Yeah.
I don't believe this. So then how do you as a human shine? Like you said, how do you shine? How do you kind of get past that? And maybe that, like you say, raises the bar so that you have to
Yeah.
really, maybe put it more effort into being a real person. So it'll be interesting. But I think right now it's kind of cool. It's something that I'm going to give to my developers and just say, use it. This can speed things up, just like using a library. I mean, there's no heroic reason to build a brand new library from scratch in React when there's a dozen out there that'll do it for you, and you can just integrate
Yep.
it.
Yeah.
Same idea.
Yeah. Just have to adapt.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, that's kind of my little story of the Chat AI. We'll see how things go. I'm excited to release a big update soon, and I'm hoping that will reduce some churn. Is the main goal for that.
Your
And then
quiz feature.
yeah, the quiz feature, and then I'll
When
talk about my next features or next goals next time.
Cool. What date are you going to have this quiz feature released?
I should have. All right. So if everything, I'm testing doing QA right now. If everything looks good, it should be by this Sunday. If not, it'll be probably the next Sunday because I'll have to fix some stuff.
All
But
right.
that's my goal.
Yeah. Okay. You're going to report in 2 weeks when
Next
we
time.
record again.
What about you? What's going on your end?
So wrapping up the year, I decided to run a survey. I did this 2 years ago. I didn't do it last year because I had my staff numbers have been cut down to one person, just me, and I was just overwhelmed. And so this year I'm going to push out the survey to my users again. I don't know if you've heard of. I'm trying to find it. There is an article by the founder of Superhuman, which is the email software. His name is Rahul Vohra. Vohra. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but he created this product market fit, kind of a survey for measuring product market fit, because you can measure metrics like churn and MRR and that kind of stuff. Product market fit is a little bit harder. Oh, there's also other survey like the NPS, Net Promoter Score survey. You've heard of that one where they ask the question, how likely would you be to recommend your software to a friend? And you have to score very highly on that scale to actually be a good thing. So I think basically anything below an 8 is considered bad in that kind of a thing, because below an 8, the user is probably not actually recommending your software to anybody. A 7 is like, yeah, I'm happy with it, but not really excited about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so those are all great, and I think we should be measuring. In fact, I run an NPS survey to my users, but this survey is something that you don't see quite as often. But I love his approach, and there's this big long article. Maybe we can put link to it in our show notes sometime. But he basically you ask yourself, or you ask your questions, one main question that says, in my survey, how would you feel if you could no longer use Civic Review? And very disappointed, somewhat disappointed, or not disappointed. So just 3 levels there. Very disappointed is actually a good thing. You want everybody saying very disappointed. And it's a little bit of a flip mentally, because usually it's kind of like very satisfied, not satisfied. You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
And because what we're trying to do is we're trying to produce painkillers, not vitamins, right? And a painkiller, I don't know if you've heard that analogy, but for anybody who is listening, a product is either a vitamin or a painkiller. And a vitamin is sort of like a nice to have. If things are tight, it's the first thing you're going to let go. And a painkiller is it kills a pain, right? I mean, you've got this severe issue going on in your business, and your product will solve that. So Civic Review, for example, government software for permitting, is definitely a painkiller for sure. I'm pretty well convinced of that. The question is, how much do they love, or how disappointed would they be if they couldn't use it anymore?
Yeah.
And there are different use cases for Civic Review for my product. So my survey, I'll just share my survey. I have a 5-question survey that I'm sending out.
Hmm.
It starts out by telling them that everything is anonymous. All the feedback is anonymous.
Cool.
In the first question, I'm trying to be able to group them into types of users. So the first question is, what kinds of records are you usually reviewing with our platform? And these records might be building permits, business licenses, planning and zoning permits, special event permits. There's different things, and these are different audiences that I might sell into as well. So once I have that information, and then they answer the next question, which is, how would you feel if you could no longer use Civic Review? I'm able to view my data in these different groups of people. So now I should know, after I run the survey, if the business license people are responding overwhelmingly positive to this question, then I'll know I have very strong market fit in that use case, but maybe not so much in other use cases. So then I can either work to improve the score for those use cases, or I can just recognize us for what we are and adjust our marketing, and go after that market where we do have really good product market fit. Then I have some other questions just for sharing. These are other things that I think a lot of this came out of Rahul's article. One is asking, what type of role at a municipality do you think most benefits from Civic Review? So I may have written software for building permitting, but maybe the building permit staff at a city doesn't think that this software is most beneficial to them. They think this software is built for business licensing. You know what I mean? And so they might answer that, and that would give me an indication, look, something is off on my product. I don't have product market fit when it comes to building permitting because they think this is for something else, right? Another question I ask is, what is the main benefit you as an individual receive from Civic Review? I just want to make sure that their definition of what is valuable in Civic Review is what I want it to be, right? And if not, then why is that? There's a lot of things that I can think about from that. And then I have one more question. This wasn't at all mentioned in Rahul's product market fit article, but while I'm doing a survey, I just want to ask one more question. And that would be, imagine you have 10 votes to put toward new features or improvements. You could allocate those votes however you want. For example, you might choose to allocate 8 votes for us to add an in-app music player, and 2 of those 10 votes to have faster load times. And so this would tell me, okay, for this individual, they really, really want an in-app music player. Like they don't really care about faster load times so much. They just want a music player in their app, in the app, And so I asked them to, just get right up. How would you split up your 10 votes and what would you ask for? It's a little bit of a confusing concept, but last time I ran this, I did get some good feedback from that, so I could find out what people are wanting more.
So you have run this before. I didn't somehow I missed that.
Yeah, I did this survey 2 years ago.
Okay.
And I got about 30 responses from it then.
That's awesome.
I have twice as many customers now, so it'll be interesting to see.
That's great.
What kind of data I have.
Yeah, I'd love to put that in the show notes, and I'd love to review that myself and just kind of get an idea, because I think that could benefit most of us, those who are running SaaSes at least.
Yeah, it's a great. I think it's a great article on measuring product market fit, and then I can take this overall score of that very disappointed, somewhat disappointed, not disappointed. I can compare that with previous years and see how we're doing.
Are you improving?
One thing that, in reflecting on my past years, I haven't really spent much product development time at all, which is fine considering I'm able to acquire paying users. That's okay. But there are certain areas where I would like to have greater product market fit, where people are telling each other about the product, raising that
Mm.
NPS
Do you
score.
have a secret, not secret, but just a way you guys do things or a feature that works a certain way that people really like, or maybe no one else has that people are now saying, hey, have you checked
Yeah,
out Civic
yeah,
Review?
yeah. One of the dangers in my industry is, and I've totally seen this with my own business in the last year and a half or so. There's the companies I'm competing against, they have archaic looking software. Like they haven't
Mm.
updated this in
Yeah.
years, and
Okay.
the customers are paying tons of money for it
Yeah.
too. And so why is that? Like, why do they let it go so severely out of date? Well, the reason is because switching costs are so high.
Totally.
And I think if you look at any industry where switching costs are super high, you're going to find just tons of dinosaur
Yes.
era software out there, because there's a smaller motivation to keep changing it.
Yeah.
Um, that's not the type of company I want to run. But even though that's the
Yeah.
case, in the last couple of years, I put hardly any development work into this, and it's because growth has been fine. Growth has been good. It's not exactly hockey stick at this point, but I've been super happy with my last year, and churn is pretty much zero. So like, if they're not churning, why focus
Yeah.
on updating the product?
Yeah. And they get used to it. And sometimes they actually, especially like at a government agency, having worked for a government agency, I worked for a university, and so did you. Um, you know that there's those who don't want the software to change, who hate that. So
Yeah,
while the developers and are like, oh, excited about the new UI, and they're like, ooh, no, thank you. I'd rather, this is why SAP was, doing up until maybe 5, 10 years ago it was strong from the 90s till to the 2010 era, and it was the ugliest piece of junk I've ever seen. I mean, it's super ugly software. But those switching costs for something like that was astronomical. Even with our one business we have, we have active campaign for our email list, and we started using it at one point for a CRM, so it has all of our notes about all of our customers in there. And like every time we kind of even consider like going to a newer system that's kind of more flashy and has better features, is like, no, there's no way. That's
yeah.
gonna take forever to get that stuff. There's no bulk export. It's just like copy paste and no thanks. I mean, so it's just we just keep
Hmm.
paying. So even if it's not a big organization, even small organizations can experience that. So
Yeah,
um, it's a good place to be. And I think as long as I'm trying to think of good examples. I mean, I think you could make the argument that Apple doesn't need to really do much to their OSs to improve that experience. Um, I mean, I'm a big Mac user, but I have to say I've seen a solid progression in both before Steve Jobs, when he was, at the helm, and also after him. There's been a slow and steady improvement process of Mac OS X from 2001 or two, whenever it came out, all the way to now, and it continues to like get better and better. And there's a good argument that they don't really need to do it. Like they have everything now.
yeah,
They have it all, but they still make that effort. But they also don't, unlike Windows back in the day, or Microsoft, where they would just change everything from one version to the next. They follow that kind of Porsche like model, where it's a slow evolution of improvement versus a radical redesign all the time. And so I think that's, as long as you're kind of using that as that could be a good way to both keep people happy that are regular users that don't want it to change too much, but also polish things up for the new ones.
yeah, yeah. I think, and it's not just the industry, the government industry. I mean, you look at when they changed the UI for like Gmail recently,
Yeah.
how many people just flipped out, or
Yeah.
when Facebook changes their UI and
Right.
everybody's
Right.
like, I hate it. And it's like,
Yeah.
it just
Yeah.
looks a little different. It's not that big a
Sure.
deal. But yeah, people really don't like change. So,
Yeah, and at the same time, even if churn isn't going down, it's like you may not see the opportunity cost of someone who looks at an 8-year-old product UI and says, this one's better, we'll go with this competitor. And so those are the things that, even though you might be having this steady growth, we just sometimes, there's that good argument of like, just making sure. I think with Facebook, they do a good job. Like, Facebook is effectively the same product, structurally from 2008, or 2004, or whatever. But it certainly has kept up enough where, I'm sure it's most of the same, architecture at the root of it, but it doesn't feel like a very old product, which is good.
Right. So a little update on the earthquake. My wife sent me a chat. We had a magnitude 3.1 earthquake at 2:44 p.m. That's 40 minutes ago.
Yeah, that'll
just
shake you up.
Well, not quite that long, but it looks like right about when I said I felt it. So I think I was
shaking
right.
around. And you're in the second story, you're saying?
I'm on the third floor of
okay.
one of the oldest, taller buildings in this town.
Just the oldest, tallest building of the town. Hopefully.
Oh, this building is easily 100 years old.
Wow.
I think it's a historical. What do they call them? Historical structure or whatever.
Landmark or something.
Yeah, landmark building or whatever. Yeah, and so I don't know how earthquake safe this building is.
I mean, having grown up in California, I know that all those buildings had to be retrofitted probably after even the 1906 one, but definitely when we had the 89 earthquake, it was like another round of retrofitting. I don't know about other states, so I am curious if your building has any. Should have some, but who knows? If you're on a fault line.
I know. Yep. Well, okay. So Kevin, on the survey, I will report back in 2 weeks and share my findings. I'm happy to be an open book, at least in terms of what my scores were from this survey. So
nice. I love it. And we'll put a link to the article in the show notes so people can check it out.
Cool.
All right. Well, until next time.
Yep. We'll talk to you later, Kevin.
All right. Have a good one.
Thanks for listening. You can learn more by visiting dadswithstartups.com. Please rate and review us by going to ratethispodcast.com/Dads with Startups. Until next time, bye.